Welcome back to Smarter Markets at IETA's North America Climate Summit 2024. I'm here with Sandeep Chowdhury, Director at VNV Advisory Services. So good to see you in person.
So good to see you.
What brings you all this way to be at the North America Climate Summit, Sandeep?
Well, it's the markets, Dave. It's the place where I think the buy side meets the supply side, and that's I think very important. Because as a supply side, we do not get to see too much of the buyer fraternity in the regions that we come from. Mm-hmm. So New York becomes this melting pot of financiers, of buyers, and of guys like me, so who are trying to sell their wares. So.
And how has it been on the supply side this year?
Well, the supply side has been challenging because of various reasons. One is obviously the enhanced scrutiny on the markets, enhanced scrutiny on the robustness of carbon accounting. So obviously it's been a bit challenging with standards upping their requirements. It's not always easy to keep transitioning from a project design to the stage, and so it's been challenging. I mean, to say the least, actually. But yeah, I guess it's for the better for the markets. But we all need to get in line and get it sorted out once again. But happy to do it. Yeah.
And how do you find the mood among the demand side this year?
I think it is a lot better than last year. And it makes me hopeful. A bit more optimism has come in, I think. Because there are some signals being sent by the bigger buyers that we are in this for the long haul. And that's the key word for the long haul, because the kind of projects that we work in on the nature space, they are not very short term. So it was always not that challenging to find spot credit buyers, but to really look at companies which are looking at a strategic kind of a carbon investment and offtake arrangements. That seems to be the flavor of this week. And it's a great start. I think people are starting to talk about it, which is a good thing. Let's hope that this actually culminates into something more concrete in the future. So yeah.
And how important is that to enable you to move ahead with the projects you're working on?
It is very important because for players like us, access to capital is not the big challenge. Access to the buy side is the big challenge, and there is no capital without the buyer. So it's really important, and I think that's something that I'm really looking forward to as follow-ups from this week, is how this buy side really shows up, and in a more concrete manner with contracts and offtakes and so on and so forth, because that's going to unlock capital. That's what's been missing so far, and which is what this week actually makes me quite hopeful, because I think we are very close to unlocking that capital which is lying around right now in the markets. Yeah.
And is this from the strategy of you get the offtake agreements to make the investments more bankable, so
Absolutely.
you can get the larger pools of capital in?
Absolutely, because the pool of capital is there, and that's the good news. The not so good news is that it needs to be securitized with offtakes, and that's where I think a lot of the markets needs to move and really concentrate hard. Two things: one is the offtake side, and the other is the cost of capital. But that's, I think, the next step, But if you can securitize these transactions over a period of time, the cost of capital is going to go down. And that's, in fact, going to lead to lesser offtake prices. So that's an ideal world we're looking at.
Yeah. And taking as a given, and it's a big given, that you would have the capital and the offtake that secures it, where do you see some of the big opportunities for the supply side over the next few years?
All right, I'm a big believer in least developed countries and emerging countries using carbon finance as social capital, and that's been my work and a lot of other people's work as well. So I think what hopefully will happen is there is going to be greater recognition within these countries that carbon markets are a good source of finance. It is not debt, it's not equity, it's not a grant. So it's a very essential form of finance, especially for the emerging countries. So I'm hoping that there will be more innovation. The supply side is going to unlock itself because these countries are geared towards supply. We've seen that before. As long as there's a demand signal, the supply side will show up, and that is good for the planet and for people. And I think that's, yeah, so I think there's a huge potential for new entrants to the carbon market. We're not talking about the legacy entrants. You had India, China, and Brazil, for example, show up. I think in the next 2.0 that we're looking at least 50 to 60 countries participating in the markets, which is a great thing for the markets. I mean, that's more democratization of the markets, and I think that's where the market should be heading. I'm quite excited.
Yeah. And when you look at like firming up the demand side, so you have countries coming in to buy specifically, say, to meet their own NDCs. Is that what you're saying? Or is it like more of the regional compliance schemes
It's a
beginning to
bit of
form?
regional compliance schemes and corporate offtakes. I'm
Okay.
still a believer in corporate offtakes. I do think businesses need to show up and do good for their net zero goals. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have a goal, you need to start acting. You can't just be sitting on the fence and waiting for something to happen. It's not going to happen. So how are you going to reach those targets? So for me, it's going to be a mix of that and regional compliance markets. I mean, we are looking at country to country buy, but that's going to be a parallel market. If you know about VCM, I think it's going to be more from the corporate side. And I'm hoping that's how the world moves.
Yeah. And once again, leaving aside the big thing of making sure that there's offtake, um, where do you see some of the big challenges over the next year?
One of the challenges is defining what is high quality. I think we're living in a world where we don't really understand that much. We keep saying high integrity, high quality. What is that? And I think everybody has their own interpretation of what is high quality and what is high integrity. And that is a problem because you have to standardize that quality at some point, which is why I'm very excited about the work that ICVCM is doing with some kind of label. Let's say, okay, if I have a CCP label, that means that I meet the threshold quality parameters, and that should then be considered a quality project. If you leave too much to interpretation on every company deciding what is good or what is bad, and I think that's a big challenge. And that we're seeing today as we speak. And I think for the markets at large, we need to sort this out once and for all. And because otherwise we'll be in a constant circus of what is quality, and that's a challenge.
Yeah. When you look at some of the principles and standards coming down from places like ICVCM, as a project developer, do you see them as, yeah, we can hit those?
We see them. We can hit those. I mean, if we can't, then it's a consultative process. I mean, I don't think everybody's going to get it right from day one, and we are okay with that. I think we're never really out there trying to aim for the perfect from day one. I mean, that's not going to happen. So, but we do believe there should be a minimum quality threshold to the markets. It's going to be a long journey. It's going to be a difficult one as well. I mean, as project developers, we will have to constantly evolve. So that's not going to be the easiest thing to do. But I think it's going to be good for the future. So of the markets, standardized quality, and that's something I'm a big believer in. Yeah.
And speaking of the future, are there any developments or like a development that you're going to be following over the next year? That's the most important.
One is the Article 6 negotiations. I mean, talk about compliance or voluntary at some way or the other. This has an influence on voluntary markets, and I think them deciding on the rules is going to give a fillip to the markets in general, and not just for the compliance markets. So I am really looking forward to that. And number two is what I'm looking forward to, what I just mentioned in the challenges, is to start to just standardize quality. These are the two challenges that I think.
All right. Well, thanks so much for making some time for us. Hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference.
Thank you, Dave, for having me here. Thank you.
Absolutely.